Waiting for the next installment of things you enjoy is always a little difficult, especially when you've only just run out of new content to watch. You've just finished what's on offer and you'll be buzzing for more, and it'll feel like the days are not passing quick enough. But soon enough your brain finds something new to occupy it, and before you know it, you'll guess what it was you'd been waiting for. Or at the very least you'll get a taste. A teaser. And sometimes on rarer occasions, you'll be lucky enough to get 2 or more teasers close by for 2 different things you were waiting to see more from. Now, I've covered a handful of things on this channel. Things I'm interested in and things I know you're also interested in. Probably why you clicked on this video after all. 2 of those things have had some teasers or trailers shown off. One giving us a small glimpse at a future installment, and the other building up to a new chapter release. And because both of them feature water and green reptilian creatures, I have somewhat of an excuse to talk about them both together in a video. For those wondering, I'm talking about the 30-second long section of an upcoming Harmony and Horror installment, as included in Battington's update video, which updated on more things than just Harmony and Horror, so do check it out, and the trailers and videos for Indigo Park's Chapter 2 release. Neither of these have a concrete time for when they'll be fully out, but I wanted to cover something smaller to get back to analysis. I am going to ask that you watch all videos though, as well as this one. These people work hard on the content, I just talk about it. While both of these subjects are horror related, they're not really that scary really. Unnerving certainly, but not horrifying. So I don't really need to do my standard mental health warning. Although if you have submechanophobia or any sort of general fear about what could be lurking under the surface of water, you might not enjoy what I'm about to cover. If you feel able to stick around though anyway, I welcome you. So let's walk through the new bits we've gotten, discuss what we get to see, try to put it into context with what we've watched before, and see what questions we can ask and possibly what answers we could guess at. There will be some educated guesses going on in this video, as these are only teasers and snippets of what's to come. Maybe I'll be right, most likely I'll be wrong. Of course, this is a script I mostly wrote a few months back, so some information might be outdated a little. I've done my best to update things, but just forgive me if I ask a question the answer is already known for. So, if you're ready to get into this, let's get started. Just as a reminder, the last Harmony and Horror installment we had was The Miracle Child, the episode that focused on Henry, but also the men of the Grey Winder family involved in this story. Thomas, the son, as well as Martin and his brother Arthur. In it we revisited some of the elements introduced in the first season, exploring them in more depth and giving them context, such as providing us with what could have been the reason Martin ended up killing off his family. We were also given some more story to do with the slightly later times that the second season had introduced to us, as well as giving us a new setting for the company of Harmony Play Inc. in this new era, the Harmony Arcadia. However, there are still some things that we've known about for a while but haven't yet been touched upon in the videos. One of these was a character who we first got a glimpse of right at the end of Season 1. With it being shown off in the very last unlisted video of the chain of videos that starts from the description of what went wrong, in a video called That's All Folks. I'm of course talking about the dragon, although I do think it probably does have a proper name that hasn't been revealed to us yet. We have of course had another peek at what the dragon might look like to some degree, with a head or mask being a part of the trailer for Season 2. Which I also think made a cameo here in the background of the Magical Sophia promotional tape, as I mentioned in my video when I talked about it. The clip is from Battington's latest video, a massive update for all the projects he's currently working on, presented by the toy maker himself. The Harmony and Horror clip is about 30 seconds long, and seems like it could be an actual part of the next episode. Similarly to sections of previous Season 2 videos, it is a handheld video camera recording of someone exploring a dark place by torchlight. This time the environment is next to a long straight channel of water, and seems to be a tunnel of some sort, with items dotted around on both sides of the water. The clip shows that the person holding the camera is walking down the tunnel on one side of the water, before pausing when they hear a distant noise. As they stand there, the water begins to ripple, and we see the back and tail of something large and green swim past the person with the camera. The camera follows it as it goes past and dives again out of sight. The clip ends with a dim, slightly distorting screen in which, if we pause at the right moments, we can make out a face in the gloom. A face with a snout and framed by two fan-like ears. This is the face of the dragon. Judging by the shapes of the items placed around, how many there are and how they are placed, it seems these are cutouts or props, and this, as well as the shape of the walls, tunnel and water channel, seems to suggest that this tunnel has to be part of a water-based ride. Although whether the entire ride is contained in the tunnels, or this tunnel is just a small part of it, we can't tell. This isn't the first time we've had a water ride being hinted at either in this story, with the aforementioned very first look at the dragon being a cardboard cutout "You must be this tall to ride" sign, sat peeking out of a body of water. So this does lend more weight to this being a fully man-made structure and some sort of ride, as opposed to maybe being natural caverns under somewhere, or maybe even a sewer network under the Arcadia, for example. This doesn't mean that the water ride isn't somehow separate from the Arcadia though, and could in fact be part of it. We do know that the Harmony Arcadia contained a lot of facilities within it from the Miracle Child. Even though a fairground, a carnival or even a water park weren't mentioned in that list of places, there's nothing to say that one or more of these places don't exist within. It could even be that the water ride was a later addition to the Arcadia or the area around it. My main guess is that ride is on the outside of the Arcadia, but the entrance and exit for riders can be accessed from inside of it, making it a good spot for people who might want to do some after-hours investigation to try and enter into the Arcadia. And on that topic, there's also a question about who is filming this footage. As mentioned earlier in the video, this is just one of a string of handheld encounters with the Harmony Play toys, in which individuals appear to be exploring in places they shouldn't be, or else in places after hours. The fact that there's another one seems to make me think that this isn't only one person responsible for all this footage, besides which the appearance of this video is different from past ones we've seen when encountering the three paper plate faced puppets, the Fuzzy Buddy, and the Henrys. My question though is, are all of these people somehow connected? What I mean by that is, did a group of people decide to go into the Arcadia after hours together to investigate, and are we seeing them being picked off one by one? Or have all of these people been individuals, or maybe at most pairs, and these incidents happened on different nights? Or possibly, are they all even taking place within the Arcadia, or are there more dangerous locations that we don't yet know about? And of course, the last big thing we can talk about with this half-minute long clip is the partial reveal of a character that I at least have been waiting to see since that first hint at the end of Season 1, the dragon. Of course, I'm pretty sure that the dragon isn't its name, but until we know it, the dragon will do as a moniker. As I said, we only get a partial reveal of the actual creature in this clip, as well as a glance at its face looming in the darkness. This leaves a lot of room though for what the full dragon actually looks like. For example, since it's shown to be swimming, could it be more serpentine in shape akin to a sea serpent? Or does it actually resemble the upright, cartoony character that we saw in that cutout so long ago? My best guess is that it does have limbs, as we really only get to see part of its back and its tail. So a lot of the creature is still hidden beneath the water. That, and it wouldn't really make much sense for the cutout to have a character with limbs, but have the actual physical dragon lacking them. Of course, there is always the possibility that the cutout was a former incarnation, like the Stitch Buddy and Sophia were to the Fuzzy Buddy and Magical Sophia. But I do think that the dragon most likely has legs at the very least, if only so it could chase people down more effectively. I will say though that it seems to be a very large thing. Probably the largest new Harmony Play creature to date. But of course, the possibility of this new, seemingly water ride location can have us speculate over what the dragon actually is. Is it just a very large toy like the other Harmony Play focused characters we've seen so far? Or could it maybe be an animatronic, such as the ones you'd typically find on rides like the one this scene seems to be set in? Given the universe this story is set in, it being a toy isn't out of the question, but it does seem more likely that the dragon is robotic in nature due to its size and the emphasis on the new toys being more robotic in nature, as shown with the security Henrys and the schematics of the Fuzzy Buddy that we see in both of their respective videos. Gotta say though, toy or robot, whoever made it did some seriously good waterproofing. If the ride does indeed go outside but link into the Arcadia, it's clear that in that case the dragon here would be acting as a guard to prevent unknown people from entering into the building after hours. This trailer was released about 3 weeks ago from when I'm writing the script of this video, and has given us our first good looks at the new location in Indigo Park we'll be making our way through, as well as providing us with our first sight at the updated model for the living mascot version of Finley. We already knew that Chapter 2 was going to be taking place inside Finley's attraction of Oceanic Odyssey, as that was where Chapter 1 ended, and from what we can see it is what we could have expected it to be with a name like that. An aquarium attraction. The trailer shows us many different large tanks with walkways around them, as well as boards with information about the exhibited fish and other creatures. However, like the parts of the park we've seen previously, Oceanic Odyssey has fallen into disrepair, with prominent plant life being seen in a good many of the shots in the trailer. My theory on this has to do with one of the very first things we see in the trailer, the dripping water. I think maybe the water has sprung a leak or several in the 8 years since Indigo Park closed, and this has worn away at the building in places, which has not only made more holes for plant life to invade, but has provided a nice wet environment for the plant life to take root and thrive within. This could mean that one of the obstacles in Chapter 2 could be flooded sections, or even corridors or rooms that are on the edge of collapse due to water leakage, which would also allow Finley to move about Oceanic Odyssey after us. However, we do see that the lights and other electronics do seem to still be working, as they'd have to be to allow Rambly AI to be a part of the chapter. Which makes me wonder if, as well as flooding, we may need to deal with sections where the water is more deadly. As we all know, electricity and water are not a good mix for the survivability of most living beings. It could even be how we fend off Finley throughout the chapter, if not the way we end up dealing with him for good if Chapter 2 ends similarly to Chapter 1, in that we dispatch the mascot that's been following us the whole time. Speaking of Finley, as I mentioned before, this trailer gives us a very good look at the new model of him, which is a much more monstrous version compared to the early, split-second glance we got at the end of Chapter 1. Compared to how Molly resembled her cartoon incarnation brought to life for the most part, and Lloyd was at least recognisable as being the same character, the living mascot Finley is a far cry in appearance from the Eeyore-like but still friendly cartoon Finley we've seen before. Part of that might be down to the fact that while macaws and lions are animals that do actually exist, sea serpents are fictional creatures, which must have meant his creation was a much more difficult process. In fact, of the 3 living mascots we've seen so far, it does appear that Molly was the most successful of the 3 in resembling her cartoon counterpart, with the process also being able to make her anthropomorphic successfully compared to how Lloyd seems to have been created shaped much more like a real lion. Finley meanwhile looks like a monster with his pure white eyes and sharp, if few, teeth, and I do wonder if he might even have scared children with his appearance if he was even shown off to the public. While we know Molly was probably shown to an audience, I'm beginning to think that neither Lloyd or Finley might have been, and maybe this is a part of why both either had attractions replaced or closed. Lloyd's Limos is something that we saw teased in 2 different backstage parts of Chapter 1, thought to be a retired ride, and we know that Oceanic Odyssey had been closed for repairs, although a sticky note during the intro attached to the poster for the attraction had "replaced" written on it. Maybe if both mascots were considered too scary for the public, this led to both attractions getting replaced or being in the process of being replaced before Indigo Park closed in 2015. I do have to note though that the living mascot Finley does lack one thing I'd noticed on all the mascots during Chapter 1, and that's the red patches. As I discussed in my previous video, Molly's beak and Lloyd's paws were stained red, and both Lloyd and Finley's previous models had these red patches along their bodies. I'd previously theorised that this might be a sign of them attacking each other, or even picking at their own bodies, but the new Finley model, what we see of it, does seem to lack them. This could just be down to the new model, they could be further down than we see, or the water could have either washed away any blood or sealed wounds before they bled. There is another idea that I hadn't thought of previously though, and that's that the red patches represent wounds inflicted by the Indigo Park staff previously. We do know from things Molly repeats during the chase that the staff, or whoever looked after the living mascots, weren't exactly kind to them. It could be with the new models that said wounds or damage are being shown now in a different manner, maybe with scars or other damage. I did know earlier that Finley does seem to have very few teeth, and while this could just be because of difficulties in his creation, it could also be a sign of neglect or abuse. I do also think that if we look closely at one of his dorsal fins behind his head, it seems a little damaged. So maybe we'll see in his full model that his body contains scarring or old wounds. What is very noticeable about Oceanic Odyssey though is not something we can see, but rather something we can't. Every one of the tanks we see in the trailer are empty. We know that the place contained fish. Beyond being an obvious aquarium, we see a sign for koi fish at 33 seconds in the trailer, and aquatic creatures of other types. We see a sign for otters at least twice in the trailer. But now none of them seem to be about. Well, the obvious answer is that they've simply died after 8 years of being left alone. I do wonder if maybe they were removed prior to Indigo Park's closure. Again, Oceanic Odyssey was already closed by the time of early October 2015 when the full park closed, as proven by the information given by Rambly AI during the Rambly's Railroad section with Finley. So maybe the fish and other creatures had been moved out of the attraction to either facilitate the repairs we're told were happening, or because Oceanic Odyssey was being set to be torn out and replaced. We do also see a sign for something called the Indigo Wildlife Initiative at around 29 seconds in the trailer, which suggests that Indigo Park was part of a program to encourage the maintenance of the species in their care, as well as educating the public about the animals in their care. It's not too far of a stretch to think that other zoos, wildlife sanctuaries and aquariums were also partnered up with them and may have taken the animals housed at Indigo Park into their own places, either temporarily or permanently when Oceanic Odyssey was being worked upon. Of course, the other answer is simply that Finley has eaten them all in the 8 years since Indigo Park closed, although how he'd managed to get from tank to tank isn't clear, at least until something broke and flooded an area enough for him to escape. Speaking of the Indigo Wildlife Initiative, I think it plays a part in what we've seen happen in Indigo Park. As mentioned before, it was probably a part in a network of similar programs between many zoos and other places dealing with animals, and I do think that it was through this network of places that Indigo Park managed to get the DNA samples, or animals, for all of the living mascots. Finley would have been easier, as we know that Indigo already had a range of aquatic fish and other animals in their parks from which to take samples to experiment with to create a living sea serpent, as different as he is from the cartoon Finley. But so far we've not heard of Indigo having any sort of attractions that contain land-based animals, or even birds. So they'd have to get these samples from elsewhere, and I think this wildlife initiative points us in the direction of where and how they'd have gotten them. Of course, being anthropomorphic means that these characters would also have needed some element of human DNA too, probably. And while we can assume it might have come from staff working at the parks, we can't yet know whether that donation was voluntary or not. This teaser is a clip supposedly sent to someone researching Indigo and Indigo Park by a person called Sophie. The message sent with the video can be read in the description.
Hey there! I saw you were looking into Indigo Park and I thought I would share this since I haven't seen it uploaded anywhere online. When I was little, I was super excited for the premiere of the new show. On the Indigo channel, I was a massive fan of the Indigo cartoons and we were getting ready to go on a trip to the parks. Anyway, my dad was always the finish what you started kind of guy, and even though I wanted to quit soccer so bad, he always ensured I made it to every practice and game. On the evening of the show's world premiere, I threw a fit and begged him to let me stay home. He yelled at me and I went to practice crying. I think he felt bad about that because once I got home, he sat me down and showed me the episode through a crappy recording he took on our old camcorder. On this flash drive is what I have left of that recording. I had a hard time ripping it off the disc that it was recorded to, so sorry if there's anything extra on there. I just haven't seen anyone post online about the premiere of this show and thought you might be interested. Thanks, Sophie.
From this we can discover a handful of things. First, the person, probably Ed, who received this clip has been looking into Indigo Park and has made this fact known publicly, probably online. Second, this particular show premiere has not yet been uploaded anywhere online, and later on we hear that she couldn't even find anyone talking about it either. Third, we once again have a mention of Indigo having parks, as in plural, which means there really might be other Indigo parks out there other than the one the game takes place in. Fourth, Indigo had its own channel, which from what we see is styled similar to the Disney Channel. Fifth, it was shot when Sophie was little, which could be anywhere from the age of 3 to possibly 10 or 11 years. Although the fact that she had football practice probably means it was on the older side of that scale. Sixth, this clip was recorded on an old video camera onto a disc from which it was ripped, which Sophie said she had some trouble with. We can also date when this video was shot just from the title. Wednesday the 20th of November 2013. And indeed the video itself confirms this with its date. We can also see that the show mentioned, Molly Ahoy, was premiered on the Indigo channel at 6 PM. The video itself is, as the message says, someone using a video camera to record the television screen as the episode begins, but during the process of working the camera we do get to see the area around the TV scattered with various items that would belong to a child. We see animal-shaped elastic bands scattered about, a Findlay plush, a letter that has obviously been sent out to Sophie to hype her up for the upcoming trip to Indigo Park, alongside a box containing a few Criticaffs, a Rambly figure that isn't the action figure because it lacks the base, what looks to be a small plastic Molly figure, cans of Bird Up, and what looks to be some sort of Rambly bobblehead. The television is also covered in stickers, something that her father complains about. We also see a quick advertisement for the action figure too, calling it new, which lets us know that the action figure was released at the end of 2013, although we don't have enough information in this video to nail down a month exactly. We then see the opening for the show, Molly Ahoy, which sees the feathered pilot of the Indigo characters crashing again into a pirate island and being adopted by a bird-based pirate crew as their new captain. We get introduced to 4 new characters in the show, Chip, Pip and Tiki, the pirate crew, as well as the antagonist, Scurv the Coyote, who is not named in the opening as the other 3 are, but had their name tweeted out by one of the VAs on Twitter. From this we can make a few possible guesses at things that might have been going on. Indigo is very much the Disney of this story, with parks and a channel that resembles the Disney Channel. However, I find it a little strange that apparently Molly Ahoy, or its premiere episode at least, had been put online somehow in the 10 years since its premiere, if indeed the message was sent in 2023 when we determined that the game is taking place. Especially as Indigo is supposed to be such a powerhouse of a company. Not even any discussion of it online. Of course, the way the message is phrased, it could be that it was simply the actual world premiere that hadn't been archived, although the no discussion thing still sticks out to me. Also, shows from around that time becoming somewhat lost media is not out of the question. A good real-life example I can think of is Timo Supremo from Disney themselves, a show that was on Toon Disney, or at least it was here in the UK, in the early to mid-2000s, and was, for a long time, lost media, and in fact still has 5 episodes lost to this very day. But this does make me think that Molly Ahoy, at least, wasn't a very popular show, and therefore no one really recorded it to later upload online. However, as the message from Sophie mentions, There is something else in this clip that isn't the premiere. The first second of the video is something else entirely. For one thing, it is dated May the 2nd, 2009, about 4 years before the main clip. While it could have been excused as just something else the father shot while trying to get the camera working, the date itself is not the typical date that something like a video camera would default to, especially since the time is listed as 2:54 PM, and the default time value would likely be set to that of 0000. Therefore, this is not just part of the attempt to get the camera working again. And short as it is, we have a chance to have a quick look at what was being filmed. While it's very dark and the camera is moving around a lot, there's two things I think I can make out. One is some sort of pillar or bit of wall, and the other is this. And while I'm not 100% sure of what it is, it seems to resemble an eye of some sort. But if it is, the question is, what does this eye belong to? What importance does this hold for the upcoming chapter? And most importantly, how did this footage end up on the video camera of what seems to be an ordinary family? Is it possible that Sophie or someone in her family have further involvement in what actually happened at Indigo Park? And of course, just as I was tweaking this script to release it to you, a new trailer dropped for the chapter, so I should probably cover it too in this video. I'll start off though by giving a quick mention that a number of the screenshots that have been going around online for the chapter in the wake of this trailer are actually not official screenshots. It seems someone had been AI generating a number of images, including some 3D renders of scenes taken from the opening of the Molly Ahoy cartoon, as well as a few of Skurv's living mascot form. I went looking for a source of these images when they first started to appear, and couldn't find any. Then saw this video by Nizd on the topic. So I'll advise you to always look for source materials to be coming from official sources before you share them. And also to not take people's artwork and use them to generate AI art. It's disrespectful to the people who worked on the original stuff. So onto the trailer itself, and it starts with the opening of Molly Ahoy again being displayed on a screen. The opening plays until the part where Molly crashes with a very wet, fleshy sound being heard, after which we begin to see gameplay footage of the chapter and a different voice takes over the song of the opening, although it speaks their lines. This voice sounds somewhat distorted and talks about Molly and what happened to her in the last chapter. It describes her as my only threat, and says that the reason she was after the player was a hunt for her chicks. They say that up front was heard a long forgotten sound that is described as a digital rat, before the rest of the trailer is taken up with repeating yo ho as scenes flash past before we see what I assume to be the opening for the chapter, and then a release year of 2026. During the trailer we do also see a number of things, including, as I mentioned earlier, a living mascot version for Skurv the Coyote antagonist for Molly Ahoy, which suggests that Chapter 2 is now going to have 2 threats within it, the same as Chapter 1 had, with Lloyd and Molly both being dangerous to the player. We also see scenery that is of a similar type as the prior trailer, but we also see a few new areas and possibly a closer look at some areas that we did see in the first trailer. We see an area with piers over the water surrounded by huts, an area that looks pirate themed with Molly painted at the end of a hallway, storerooms, what looks to be one of the aquarium areas from the first trailer as well as more of the aquarium, an area that seems to resemble the innards of a submarine which also looks like it might be part of the aquarium, more piratey themed areas, what is either a photo opportunity or guided tour marking a Finley statue as the Shy Serpent, and what looks like a brief snippet of gameplay from a 2D game where you guide Rambley through some sunken tunnels. Oh, and of course we also get a glimpse of the giant Finley living mascot, or at least his enormous tail fin. What's most interesting to me though is that prior to the waking up sequence that ends the trailer, which I think might be the opening for the chapter, is that we see a short pan right from the point of view of someone standing outside of the Jetstream junction door we passed through last chapter, but the viewpoint is coloured blue and the background seems to be somewhat rippled and distorted. From this trailer, we can now say for certain that Molly Ahoy was at least popular enough to get its presence into the Indigo Park we're at. At the very least, Scurv seems to have been well regarded enough that he was made into another living mascot, from which the brief glimpse the trailer gives us of him seems to place him into the successful category alongside Molly, at least in his appearance. Given that the narration about Molly's demise starts by calling her my only threat, we can also hazard a guess that Scurv can talk, and not just as Molly did by repeating things she'd heard. Scurv is capable of actual independent speech and probably has some level of intelligence behind him, although how much is uncertain. It does however sound like Molly has been keeping Scurv at least cornered into parts of Oceanic Odyssey up until now, and with her death he finally feels free to escape and do whatever it is he needs to do. Speaking of Oceanic Odyssey, this trailer also has given me some more ideas about why the place seemed to be closed for repairs, and why that sticky note pinned to it in the game's opening read replaced. From what we see, Molly Ahoy had been added to Oceanic Odyssey alongside the aquarium, and when the place closed for repairs, it's likely speculation among the Indigo fans went around that they were thinking of replacing Oceanic Odyssey with more things from Molly Ahoy, a show that was, at the time the park closed, a fairly recent addition to the Indigo library. Whether they were going to or not, I guess we'll find out in the chapter. Maybe. We also learn from Scurv's narration that Molly, apparently, seems to have had chicks. However, being the unique creature she is, I'm not entirely sure how Molly could even have laid eggs that would hatch into more mini macaws. Maybe something from the Wildlife Initiative could have given her the genetic material to fertilise her eggs? Or maybe Molly's chicks were instead another group of living mascots that she was taking care of. There's a possibility that maybe Scurv isn't the only Molly Ahoy exclusive character that Indigo created, and that Chip, Pip and Tiki are also going to make appearances in this chapter or future ones. His references to a digital rat are also referring to Rambly AI, and describing him as a long-forgotten sound seems to suggest that Rambly AI has not spoken or appeared on screens for a while before Ed got there. At least not where the living mascots have been able to hear him. And I had theorised in my video on Chapter 1 that the AI helper had been contained in the computers at the main entrance for the last 8 years, and was using Ed to venture further into the park, so this might be confirmation of that. Finally, I think that brief view we get before the wake-up sequence is not directly from the player's point of view. It's either a camera feed that's being viewed, or we're seeing through the eyes of one of the living mascots, or maybe even Rambly AI. Having gone back to look at the similar area in-game, we can see that the background behind that wall is nowhere near as distorted, but it does seem that the distortion is focusing around a certain point, which seems to be this clock. It's something that I had noticed in my playthrough, but it does appear that maybe it has some level of importance. And just an additional little bit here, while editing, going through the gameplay trailer, I did notice something moving at the end of this hallway, and by the looks of it, it looks to be a white cockatoo. It looks to be Chip. So we can confirm that at least one of the pirate crew is around Indigo Park in some form. Whether that be as a living mascot or something else, we'll find out. And with that, I'm going to wrap up this video. I've covered a handful of things related to upcoming installments on things I've covered in the past, and I'm just sorry it's taking me a while to get it out. While this video has mostly been me asking questions and speculating about what's upcoming based on what little we got, I hope that you've enjoyed it nonetheless. I know there are still things to cover from these two series, such as the Season 1 remakes of Harmony and Horror, and hidden images from Indigo Park that you can find through the site for Indigo Park's shop, but I just wanted to deal with the teaser content here. I like to have a reason to group things together, and this just worked out. And then of course I have the other big projects that have been out for a while that I've yet to make videos on. I'm hoping to work my way up to doing large videos again. A big thank you to my special guest voice artist, whose link I've put up on the screen and in the description, for being the voice for Sophie, All that's left for me to say is I hope you're as ready as I am to see what new things are to come from around the corner, and what new parts of the story we've yet to be told.